What if the loudest moment of Tupac's last night wasn't the chaos outside, but the heat building earlier, behind a closed door, in a private room with the wrong mix of people just down the hall? What if the real pivot happened off the radar, where whispers travel faster than sirens and eyes don't meet by accident? Gene Deal's version doesn't just poke holes, it flips the whole setup on its head. In his telling, Jay-Z wasn't just in Vegas, he was in the same building, low-key, out of sight, and Deal frames it like Tupac knew it and wanted answers face to face. Right then, no delay. None of this is courtroom evidence, that's clear. This is Deal's insider story. What he says he saw, what he says he heard, and how the room felt when the pressure hit max. Here's why people won't dismiss it, even as an allegation. It's specific, not vague. A private room, a hidden presence, a near confrontation that almost went live, and a last-second choice that pulled it back before it spilled into the hallway and beyond.
Pac had got whiffed that Jay-Z was in town. Well, you know he gonna do a show because Jay-Z, he doing a show. But you gotta realize Jay-Z had became an enemy of Pac because I think he had said some or was gonna do a song with Big or whatever like that, the whole 9 yards. So Jay is now Pac enemy. So he gets a phone call saying that Jay is not gonna come out the room because Tupac threatened him. So he's not gonna do his show. Can he make some phone calls, you understand, to get Pac off the bullshit?
Then history takes over and the night ends the way we all know. But the real question lingers. If Deal's version has even a piece of truth, what does that say about the minutes right before it all went public? Deal paints Vegas like a pressure cooker. The city blazing with East Coast versus West Coast energy, tempers already simmering. The industry wasn't just divided by music. It was money lanes, power circles, and loyalty lines drawn tight. Tupac stood dead center, loud, fearless, reading the room like something was off and people were moving strange around him, and he wasn't about to let that slide quietly.
He may have talked to Big D and Eric B called Suge, and Suge was laughing, saying that wasn't him, because they tried to make it seem like it was Suge that was doing it, but it was Pac. So I guess Suge called Pac. Pac let him go ahead and do his show and everything like that. But Jay was scared.
And then, according to Deal, there's a detail that most fans never picture in that scene. In his version, Jay-Z wasn't out front, wasn't mingling, wasn't part of the show at all. He was inside the same building, tucked away in a back room, quiet and unseen. Deal paints that setup like a ticking problem because, in his eyes, Tupac wasn't trying to play politics that night. He was past patience. He didn't want to wait, didn't want to talk later. He wanted answers right then, face to face, about loyalty, about respect, and about whatever he felt was moving behind his back. That's where Deal's story hits harder. In his telling, Jay-Z never steps out. He stays behind those closed doors, while Tupac moves closer to the edge, ready to break the silence.
Man, he was scared. Probably still is scared.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. And Suge, he told Pac to chill out.
Yeah, Suge told Pac to chill out. You know what I'm saying? Because, see, they was trying to, you got to realize is that it was going to call a dissension because they was trying to start
Deal describes the energy like static in your jaw. That kind of heavy quiet where everyone's holding their breath, waiting for one word to light the whole room on fire. Then, out of nowhere, Suge Knight steps in and breaks the moment. Deal remembers it clear. Suge says just 6 words. Give him a pass. That's it. 6 words, 1 call, and suddenly the explosion that was seconds away from blowing the room apart just doesn't happen. And that's what keeps people replaying this moment over and over. Because Suge Knight wasn't known for calming things down, his name carried the opposite energy. So why, in Deal's version, does the man famous for pushing limits suddenly become the one holding it together?
You this story, if you don't mind me asking.
I was there.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that, man. I didn't know you was there. So you was there when Jay was scared to come out his hotel room. I had no idea, man.
I used to roll with Chaz.
Deal's message is sharp. Suge understood exactly what was at stake. And maybe, just maybe, that's why he made the call to cool the fire before it spread. Not a fight, not an argument, a collision. The kind that could have yanked hidden names straight into the light. A collision that could have blown the lid off relationships nobody wanted the world to see. And dragged serious money and influence under a spotlight no one could dim. Because if Tupac had walked into that room and started speaking the way he spoke, raw, fearless, straight from the chest, there's no controlling where that energy goes. And once someone like him feels cornered, you can forget about silence. He's talking until the walls shake. That's why Deal's version doesn't sound like gossip.
Bro with Chaz every day, bro. And then it came out. And then it came out, somebody else told the story. But I think it may have been Dame Dash or something like that.
It plays like a near miss, like the kind of moment history almost caught, but just barely didn't. A heartbeat away from rewriting everything we thought we knew. A moment that could have sparked a brand new story before the old one even began. And if you're wondering why that quiet moment matters so much, Deal's take is sharp. The quiet part of the night explains the loud part. What went down in silence set the stage for everything that erupted later. It also drags other big names back into the frame, including Diddy. Not as a confirmed player, but as someone Deal hints had more connection to the deeper tensions and behind-the-scenes moves than the clean version of history ever admitted. See, Deal isn't just telling a who was where story. He's exposing how the story gets written, how pressure gets shifted, how chaos gets redirected, and how certain names manage to stay just outside the blast zone, keeping their hands clean while the storm rages right next door.
Nike made that statement. What did Puff do? He got on stage, because if a brick hits you, say ouch. He got on stage and spoke on it. You know, another executive come up here speaking on that. I love Dr. J, I love what they doing. I get Death Row, they props in the whole 9 yards. If he thought he was talking about Jermaine Dupri, why the fuck would he spin and say?
The public saw chaos, but inside, it looked like a chessboard, with every move carrying weight and risk. And that's where Deal's version drops a heavy question. If Jay-Z was staying hidden that night, what was he really afraid of? Deal's framing makes it sound calculated, not fear for safety, but fear of the wrong conversation happening in front of the wrong people. Fear of getting pulled into the hottest fire in the culture while his rise was still building momentum. Fear of being part of a scene that, once it started, couldn't be stopped or spun back into control. And that's what makes people lean in. Because then comes the second question, the one that really burns. Why was Tupac so locked in on Jay-Z that night? Deal hints it wasn't just personal beef. It was about what Tupac thought Jay-Z stood for at that moment.
In Atlanta, that something was bought and he thought I was gonna lie about it because Puff was trying to say it was his and it wasn't his, it was Big's. And you understand? And when he said, and they had made a bet that I was gonna go on Puff's side. So when I got to the studio, I said, nah, Puff, you had that one and Big had.
Rising power, East Coast pull, and a kind of industry politics that Pac never trusted. It wasn't just about music, it was about energy, territory, and the feeling that lines were being drawn in silence. So when Suge steps in, it starts to look less like he was protecting Jay-Z, and more like he was protecting the room, protecting what could have been said, what could have been overheard, what could have leaked and turned into a weapon outside those walls. Because once words like that leave a room, they don't come back. They grow legs, they spread, and they change everything. In Deal's telling, after Suge speaks, the whole place freezes. Jay-Z stays unseen, Tupac stops cold, and everyone in that space just knows. The air shifts, the tension hangs heavy, and silence says what no one dares to speak out loud. They didn't just dodge an argument, they dodged a moment that could have rewritten the whole timeline.
The tension and beef started between Death Row and Bad Boy.
All the tension started between Puff and Suge Knight. You understand? All the tension came from Puff and Suge Knight. Suge wanted Puff to have Big them do a show. Puff wanted to get paid for Big doing the show. But Suge had did a whole lot of free shit for Puff at one time. Because when Puff used to come out to California, before he could afford security, before he could afford it, Suge used to look out for the cat. Tupac fuck with East Coast and West Coast niggas. How you gonna have Nice and Smooth out there with him and they from the East Coast? You understand what I'm saying? He with niggas from the East Coast, West Coast, down south, the whole 9 yards. Pac had some shit with him, yeah. But all them niggas had shit with them. All them niggas behind scenes talk.
Not because it would have instantly solved the mystery, but because it would have flipped the emotional layout of that night. Who stood where? Who looked nervous? Who looked protected? And what kind of invisible pressure was boiling right before everything blew? That single missed collision could have changed how we read every face in the story. Then the chaos outside took over and turned the city into a breaking headline. But here's where Deal's version shifts from controversial to flat-out explosive. Because he doesn't stop in Vegas, he hints that there's more, something real. Not just talk, not just theory. He says there are receipts, recordings, papers, material, stuff that, in his framing, could connect dots people have been arguing about for decades. And the moment you start talking like that, naming real places, claiming real evidence, you open the door to a huge question. If you made that up, someone can call your bluff. But if you keep repeating it anyway, you're either lying with full confidence or you truly believe there's something out there waiting to surface. That's what locks everyone onto the so-called Cuba angle.
Still alive and well, Suge Jr. has been posting images of Tupac posing with celebs, saying that the rapper lives in Malaysia now and the Illuminati knows all about it. Meantime, today, Suge himself has been sentenced to 28 years in prison for killing a man with his truck in Compton, California.
Because that detail doesn't sound random. It sounds like strategy. It suggests somebody understood what was coming and moved smart. Somebody who treated information like currency, like leverage, and stashed it somewhere they thought would never make noise. And if you even consider that possibility for a second, that somewhere out there, something real exists, the next question hits hard, and you can't escape it. Who had the access to move something that serious? Who had the reach to keep it buried for years? Who understood exactly what would happen if it ever saw daylight? Because let's be real, random fans don't move paper trails. Random fans don't relocate recordings or stash proof for decades. If Deal's hint is right, we're talking about people with power.
Having one lung, for example, you know what I mean? Never have his voice again, you know, Pac loved music. I think they had to remove a finger or something. She like, I know my son, his pride, he probably wouldn't be able to live like that. You know, she just felt like he fought enough and she decided to, let him go. No one questioned her and said, why did you do it and stuff like that. You know, people just support.
People with real connections. People who knew that the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a rumor, it's evidence. Now pause right there. This is where most stories drift into fantasy and conspiracy. But Deal's version doesn't need to be airtight to explain why it keeps coming back up. It survives because it fits a pattern. A private moment almost goes public. A powerful name steps in and shuts it down. The world never hears what really went down. Then time rolls forward, the night becomes history, and the messy truth gets cleaned up into one simple, easy version. But years later, someone who was there, or claims to have been, comes back and says, "You missed the part that mattered." And for Deal, that part isn't the chaos outside. It's the room, the silence, the unseen faces, the confrontation that never happened, the decision that stopped a chain reaction before it started. And if that's true, even halfway true, it changes everything about how we read that night. Not about who pulled the trigger, but how the tension stacked up moment by moment until something had to break. The deeper you look, the less it feels like random chaos and the more it feels like pressure being managed, contained, redirected. Which sets up the real cliffhanger. If Deal's out here confidently saying Jay-Z was in that building staying hidden in his account, then what else does he know that he hasn't said yet? If Deal's willing to hint that major figures from that era knew way more than the public ever got to see, if he's confident enough to drop talk of receipts and even point toward Cuba, then you have to ask, what's he really building toward? Because the second you name a place, you're inviting people to check. You're saying, go look, and that changes everything.
Still alive and well, Suge Jr. has been posting images of Tupac posing with celebs, saying that the rapper lives in Malaysia now and the Illuminati knows all about it. Meantime, today, Suge himself has been sentenced to 28 years in prison for killing a man with his truck in Compton, California.
Naming a location doesn't just stir curiosity, it plants the seed that something real might be out there, something that can be found. And if someone ever takes that seriously, if someone actually starts looking, then the whole conversation flips overnight. It stops being internet chatter and becomes about what can be proven. That's why this version of the story won't die. Not because everyone buys it, but because it adds a missing layer. It's not just about the chaos outside. It's about the quiet, the private rooms, the unspoken choices, the things that shape the night long before the lights and sirens. So the question isn't just who did what, it's who shaped the story. Who had the power to keep it clean, to simplify it, to make sure certain details never hit the timeline?
Having one lung, for example, you know what I mean? Never have his voice again, you know, Pac loved music. I think they had to remove a finger or something. She like, I know my son, his pride, he probably wouldn't be able to live like that. You know, she just felt like he fought enough and she decided to, let him go. No one questioned her and said, why did you do it and stuff like that. You know, people just support.
Because if that room mattered the way Deal suggests, then what happened after matters even more. Who protected who? Who slipped out unseen? Who left that building with the story already packaged and ready to feed the press? And if Deal's version points anywhere, it's right there, to the idea that the truth isn't just about that final violent moment. It's about the pressure that night created, the decisions made in rooms no camera ever caught, and the people who made sure silence stayed louder than any headline. If Deal's story has taught us anything, it's that silence isn't empty, it's loaded. Because when silence follows tension that thick, it's never peace, it's strategy. The kind of quiet that means phones are ringing later, messages are being passed, and people are checking who's still loyal and who's not. In the days after Vegas, Deal claims the energy shifted fast. Calls came in, meetings got quiet, and certain faces stopped showing up in public altogether. He says that's when the narrative cleanup started, fast, sharp, and surgical. The story that made the news wasn't the story people whispered about behind closed doors. Publicly, it was about violence, ego, and bad luck. Privately, it was about control, leverage, and who could spin the tragedy to their advantage. Deal paints it like there were people who understood the power vacuum before it even opened, and they moved first. And that's what makes his version so uncomfortable. It doesn't just question who was in the room, it questions who wrote the story of the room afterward. Because once something that big happens, the first version people hear usually isn't the truth. It's the version that protects the right players. So when Deal hints that recordings or documents might still exist somewhere out there, maybe stashed away, maybe waiting for the right time, it doesn't sound like fantasy anymore. It sounds like a loose end nobody wants pulled, because if even one piece of that material ever surfaces, it won't just rewrite a headline, it'll redraw the power map of an entire era. And that's why Deal's name keeps coming back up, because he's not offering closure, he's offering questions. Questions that make the night in Vegas feel less like an ending, and more like the start of something that never stopped echoing. Deal says the echoes didn't stop in Vegas, they spread. They followed certain names across states, into studios, into boardrooms, and even into business deals that shaped the next decade.
The tension and beef started between Death Row and Bad Boy.
All the tension started between Puff and Suge Knight. You understand? All the tension came from Puff and Suge Knight. Suge wanted Puff to have Big them do a show. Puff wanted to get paid for Big doing the show. But Suge had did a whole lot of free shit for Puff at one time. Because when Puff used to come out to California, before he could afford security, before he could afford it, Suge used to look out for the cat. Tupac fuck with East Coast and West Coast niggas. How you gonna have Nice and Smooth out there with him and they from the East Coast? You understand what I'm saying? He with niggas from the East Coast, West Coast, down south, the whole 9 yards. Pac had some shit with him, yeah. But all them niggas had shit with them. All them niggas behind scenes talk.
Because when one empire falls, another starts to form, and the silence from that night turned into the foundation for the next wave of power. According to Deal, that's the part most people never trace. The shift from street power to corporate power, all built on the lessons learned that night. He claims some people treated the tragedy like a turning point, a signal that it was time to move smarter, quieter, and richer. Suddenly, the same voices that once shouted loyalty started speaking in contracts and percentages. The same energy that fueled the feud started fueling labels, partnerships, and billion-dollar brands. And Deal keeps saying the same thing. You can't separate the music from the moves that came after. He paints the timeline like this. One night of chaos creates a decade of structure. Every silence, every decision, every name that stayed hidden in that Vegas building carried forward like a ripple. Those who were there didn't just survive, they adapted. They learned that power wasn't about being loud anymore. It was about knowing when to stay unseen. And that's where Deal drops his heaviest line yet, that the real legacy of that night isn't just the loss of Tupac, it's the rise of control. The way influence changed hands, the way fear turned into strategy, and the way truth got rewritten into history. Because if his version holds even a spark of truth, it means the night that ended, one story might have secretly started another. And that story, Deal hints, is still being written in rooms we'll never see. So next time somebody says, "We already know what happened," stop and ask yourself, if we really know everything, then why do these other versions keep crawling back up with names, rooms, and so-called receipts attached? Why do they always circle the same haunting idea, that the loudest part of that night might have been the distraction, not the truth? Because what if all that chaos outside wasn't the story, but the cover for the real one? The whispers, the hidden faces, the pressure that built behind closed doors and never made the headlines. That's the piece people can't shake, the quiet part that might just explain the rest. Deal's story keeps echoing because it forces everyone to look twice, to listen past the noise and wonder what was really happening in those unseen moments. Every version, every claim, every hidden name keeps looping back to that one question. What if history's been playing us with the volume turned up just high enough to miss what mattered most? If you're drawn to stories like this, where the loudest scene isn't always the real scene, then you won't want to miss what's coming next. There's always another layer, another clue, another silence worth breaking. So don't just scroll past. Hit that like, drop a comment, share your take, and subscribe so you don't miss the next drop. Because the story might be old, but the truth, it's still out there, hiding in plain sight.